Hey, it's Patrick, and I'm going to show you how to put a T-bar setup on your Harley-Davidson Road Glide. This install is going to be the same for 15 and up Road Glides. If you have a Rushmore Edition and up, all the way up in the Milwaukee 8s, this is going to be a very, very similar install. This is a great thing to do to get your bars into a kind of a more aggressive riding position. You can control this big bike better. We do have to relocate the gauges, and there's a handful of ways to skin this cat. There's a bunch of products out there. For today, we're going to be using Arlen Ness parts. An Arlen Ness top clamp, their risers, and their gauge relocators that are in one, and a moto style bar. You can see we have the gas tank and front fairing taken off the bike. That is not necessary, although I would recommend that you remove the gas tank for this. If you need to do that, we have a video and shows you how to do that. We'll throw it in the description. And also, all the tools you're going to need, we will list in the description as well. The first thing we need to do is get rid of some of our gauges here, get to our handlebars so we can get all that off. So let's get to work. So we have to get into our gauge pod area to get access to our handlebar clamp. Now, one thing we have to do is take this ignition out. It can be a little tricky, and once you take this ignition out, you don't want to turn your handlebars because you don't want to misalign that ignition. To take it out, it's a little bit of a secret handshake. You turn it all the way to the right. You have to put your key in here. We're going to turn it. Underneath here, which we'll show you in a second, there's a pin along with a spring that we want to keep a hold of. So there's our spring, and there's the pin that we press up on to get this switch out. Once we do that, we're going to take a T25, take our 2 screws out on either side of our gauges, and remove all that off the bike so we can get to all the wiring that's behind it. So now that we're inside our gauge pod, we're going to unplug our gauges, and we're going to take our T25, take our 3 screws out, because we're obviously going to need to reuse our gauges, but we don't need to use the plastic trim that's on there anymore. That's going to go away. So we're just going to set our gauges off to the side, and we're going to come back over here to get to our wiring to start unplugging things. So now we have to get these bars ready to be taken off the bike. To do that, we need to get in here and unplug everything. So we have a couple of wires coming down inside the bar from each of the switch housings right here. We're going to unplug all of those. You should have switch housing on the left, you should have a switch housing on the right, and your throttle by wire. There's also a couple of accessory switches down here we're not going to use. We're going to unplug all of that and just kind of tuck it back out of the way. So you can see everything on our bars are free. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our T25, we're going to take both of our master cylinders off, brake side and clutch side. We're not going to remove them from the motorcycle, just from the handlebar. I'm going to lay them over the top. We're using a 10-inch riser with an 1.5 inch pullback. These lines should work, so we don't need to replace them. I'm just going to lay them over the top. Once all of that's loose and everything's unplugged, we'll be able to take our 4 Allens out of our top clamp, remove the bar off the motorcycle, and we can get it to a bench to get our switch housings off to be moved over to our new setup. So we have everything unplugged in here, and make sure you have this flat piece of plastic loose from the gauge pod. This is in 2 pieces. We need to get this all the way out of here. Now, this next part is a little bit janky, but I'm gonna do it this way because we have this bike up in this lift and everything is like set in place, and I can't turn the forks. On the bottom, there's a T40 that we can get to underneath the fairing. But on the top, you can't get a ratchet or a T40 in there. You can grab a hold of that thing with channel locks, break it loose, and take it out with your fingers. If you have your bike in a spot where you can twist it back and forth, you can take it out with a T40. Honestly, we're not going to reuse it, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to take those 2 T40s out on the left and the right, and then we're going to work this piece of plastic up out of here so we can get to our top triple clamp. So you take the second bottom screw out. This air dam here is going to come loose. You want to make sure you don't drop that on your fender. Now we're going to take our ignition / fork lock all the way out. That is a 5/32 Allen. You see this little blue tool I have in here? This is from Jim's. This just keeps everything lined up. Now, if you take this off and you don't move anything, you should be good. This is just an alignment tool from Jim's. It's an option, it's not necessary. 5/32, we're going to take it out. We'll end up installing that on our new triple clamp. After that, we're going to take a 1/4 inch Allen. We have a pinch bolt on each fork tube and a pinch bolt around the stem nut. You do not need to take the stem nut out. It's just being pinched on there. We'll loosen up all those pinch bolts. You might have to persuade it with a mallet or something, and then that triple clamp will come all the way off. Get one little plug right here. It's a ground, which we will unplug. Boom. Voila. Boat anchor. So now we have to transfer our switch housings over to our new bars. You're gonna need a T25. There's 2 screws in each switch housing. You have to pull them real slow off of the handlebar because we're pulling the wires through the bar. You don't have to take the plugs off the end, they'll pull through. But on the right side, you're also pulling the throttle by wire lead with the switch housing wires. It's a little weird because you're pulling them out of 2 different spots at the end of the bar, but you work them together, they will eventually come out. Don't get all gorilla arm and yank on them because you'll pull a connection loose and you'll have a real bad day. The good news is the left side one should be easier. 1, 2, now we're off to the other side. All right, now we can start putting them back into our new bars. So one thing that can make it a little easier to pull these wires through is run like a shoelace or a piece of cord or something through there, tape it around your wires to pull through. I recommend taping the twist grip, the electronic throttle wire up, pulling it, because it has to pull from the end, and then feeding your switch housing wire in behind it. So this is the throttle by wire control. We have a cord going through the bar, taped to the wire. The wire or the cord coming out the bottom where we want it to go. So when we push this, we'll be able to pull it at the same time. It'll just help us get through these bends. But when we get part way through here, we're gonna have to start our switch housing wire. You see I got the 2 plugs split apart. You don't wanna try to feed them through both like this. It'll make it more difficult. So you lay one back, it makes it a little more sleek to get through there. There's our switch wire right there coming out. We get to the end, you just want to match up your tabs, the narrow and wide tabs, with the narrow and wide portions of the end of the bar. Like I mentioned, I'm gonna put the clamshells back on here, but not tighten them up. Just have them on there so they're ready to install when we get up on the bike. So basically we're gonna do the same thing on the other side of the bar. This should be a little bit easier because we're only dealing with 1 wire. We'll pull it through, we'll loosely put the switch housing back on the bar. So we're gonna get our top clamp and our risers ready to mount. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take this plate off right here with an 1/8 inch Allen, because we are reusing our ignition switch. If you're not reusing yours, you can just leave this plate on. Then we're gonna put our riser bushings in. We're only going to use the silver caps on the bottom. They're built into the riser on the top, so we don't need to put those in there. On the risers, we're gonna take the bottom of the gauge mount, which doubles as our top clamp. We're gonna take those Allens out with a 1/4 inch Allen. Oh, Jesus Christ. We put thread locker on them, and we're going to run them back in, but we're not going to torque them yet. Then we're gonna mount our risers onto our triple clamp with our big bolts. We're gonna put a little bit of thread locker on these, and we're gonna run them down to 30 foot-pounds. This, for our set of hardware, is gonna be a 3/4 socket. Should have a couple of stubby Allens. We're gonna take a 3/8 Allen, some blue thread locker. We put them on the bottom of the triple clamp. These are gonna be our fork stops. We're gonna torque these to 25 foot-pounds. Sweet. We're done. We're gonna go back up top to the bottom side of our gauge pod here. We're gonna torque these 4 Allens with our 1/4 inch Allen to 18 foot-pounds, and I'll do it in an X pattern. Okay, now we need to kind of get our work area cleaned up to bring everything over and mount it on the bike. So I'm gonna get rid of this plastic piece here. I'm gonna get our wires free. The wires that we're not gonna use, like the auxiliary switch plugs that we took off earlier, I'm gonna push back into the frame and get those nice and tidied up. And basically clean up around here. All this road grime that's on our stem nut here, we don't want any of that on there when we go to put our new stuff on. We'll get that cleaned up and ready to bring our new stuff over. We're gonna take our top clamp assembly, we're gonna slide it onto the motorcycle. We're gonna take a 1/4 inch Allen, we're gonna torque these pinch bolts to 14 to 18 foot-pounds, and then we're gonna tighten our stem nut pinch bolt with a 5/16 Allen anywhere from 22 to 26 pounds. Before we get too far along, Ness sends a really nice cover for the stem nut. You take a 16th Allen, and there's a little bitty Allen screw there. We'll just run that down hand tight, don't get too crazy with it. So now we're gonna mount our bars. This next part, it's gonna be a little tricky though. We have our wires coming out of our bar, and then we have a new wire we have to add. This is an extension for our gauges that are gonna be up top. We're gonna take the wires on the right side, which is our throttle by wire and our switch wire. We're gonna feed them down inside the risers so it'll be nice and clean, and they'll come out down here at the bottom. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side, basically simultaneously, but with the one switch housing wire and the new gauge extension wire. They're gonna go down the left side riser. Now you may need an extra set of hands for this just to kind of manage everything. I'm gonna stop and throw a little bit of tape on these so they stay together on the way down. They don't get all, we don't wanna mess up our pins. I'm gonna tape these together so a little smoother going through there. Okay, so we have this gauge wire through, we have the left switch through, working on a couple down here now. Come on. I think that's the switch housing. Now we need the throttle wire. I feel it. Yeah, buddy. Come on, one more plug, there it is. Bam, okay. I'm gonna pull all the slack out except for the gauge extension wire. We're gonna leave about 3 inches hanging out up here on the top. We have our wires ran through our risers, our bars just sitting there. So we're going to take our top clamp, which also doubles as our gauge pod, and we're gonna put it on. We're gonna make sure we run our wire through the hole in the gauge pod that's gonna plug into our gauges. Now, we're not gonna do this permanently. We're gonna throw some thread locker on these, run them in with a 1/4 inch Allen, but we're just gonna kind of snug them up. But this is a good time to make sure your bars are centered and maybe sit on the bike and get them close to where you're gonna want them. After we get these nice and secure, we'll move back down to the bottom and start hooking up wires. So now we have to build our new plug for our gauge extensions. Not as tough as you may think. We're basically gonna match up wires color for color. Ness sends the plug right here. And if you hold it up against here, you can kind of see the little pins in here, and that's what we're gonna match up to. And down here on the back side, we're gonna match color for color. So this first wire on the top of this plug is black with a green stripe. So what we're going to do, take our black wire with a green stripe, and we will push it through the back of the plug. It will pop out inside here. It's way down in there. You'll kind of feel like a positive engagement. You kind of feel like a little bit of a click. If you need to redo this, you can take these out of there, but it is difficult. So I would recommend getting them right the first time. So we'll match up color for color. So we have our plug here. We'll put our black with our green, and then the next one you see, it's a white with a black. We'll go to find our white with black. We would push it through our plug, so on and so forth, matching up all the colors. When you're done, just plug it in. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is plug in the rest of our wires. We're gonna plug in the throttle by wire, we're gonna plug in our switch housings, and then we're gonna tuck them all away as best we can, get that all cleaned up, and then we'll come back and put on our ignition switch and lock. So now we're gonna take our 5/32 Allen, we're gonna reinstall our ignition and fork lock, and then plug our plug back in. So now we're gonna come back to the top. We're gonna do our final torque on these 4 Allens. These are gonna be 15 foot-pounds in an X pattern. We're gonna plug in our gauges, put our gauge pod in here, and put our 3 screws in our trim ring, and we're gonna put a little drop of blue thread locker on each of these. So now our gauges are finished up. We're gonna go back up here to our hand controls. We'll need our T25. We're gonna loosen up our switch housings, put our throttle and our left-hand grip on. We're also gonna put on our master cylinders. But to do that, we have to switch clamp styles. This is the stock touring style clamp, this big one here. And it has this big pin, it just won't work on the aftermarket bars. We're gonna switch it to the more narrow style like you'd find like a Sportster or Softail or Dyna. Like I said, we use a T25. We'll get everything adjusted just how we want it. A little switch check. Just about ready to hit the road. So now we need to install our ignition switch cover. We're gonna take the little collar off the top. It just unscrews, and we'll take the piece off underneath, and it has little tabs. It all goes back the same way. When we slip this cover over the top, there's some double-sided tape inside, but also there's a set screw with a 5/64 Allen. Put that on, tighten the set screw up, and then we can put our actual key lock back in there. All right, I'm gonna drop this in there. We just twist it back straight, and we'll be done. Sweet. So from here, all that's left is to tuck away our wires and put our bike back together, tank, fairing, that sort of thing. Now, a lot of people ask, will my stock lines work? By lines, I mean the brake lines and clutch line. This is a 10.5-inch riser with about an 1.5-inch pullback, and our lines have plenty of room. This is also probably gonna take you a little while. Give yourself plenty of room. I wouldn't try to do this and ride in the same day. Give yourself a solid weekend to get this all done. If you're still looking for more information, go ahead and hit that info tab on your desktop or mobile device. It'll take you to the product detail page where you can read all kinds of other reviews and specs about all the stuff we installed here. If you still need more information, feel free to reach out to our customer service team. They would love to talk to you about what works best for you, your motorcycle, and your budget. I am Patrick. Thank you for watching. Now go work on those motorcycles.